Hello friends, today I thought I would do some book recommendations. I was feeling in the mood to recommend some books because it's reaching the end of 2020 and honestly, I feel like everyone just needs a couple books to read that they want to escape into, or they just need something different from the norm that is COVID time and the norm that is this election that has been going on. It's ended, but it continues to be a problem because Mr. Trump won't just say that he lost and surrender his position. Anyways, before we start ranting about that, let's just get into some book recommendations. I chose a very large variety of books. I try to choose things that I haven't seen on BookTube too often. Obviously, not every book is gonna be like that, but I just wanted to choose some books that weren't as popular so then I would get a different range of books to recommend. And looking at my list, I honestly don't think a lot of these books have made like really huge rounds on BookTube or have been hyped up too much. So I'm glad because of that. Okay, let's just get into it. First off, I just want to start off a little light. So I'm going to recommend An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. Yes. So this is a book if you're feeling like escaping into a fantasy world, but you don't want the feeling of being dragged down by reading an entire series. You kind of just want a light, fluffy read and then be done. Like, that's it. You read this and then you go about your life and you're happy and whatever. And this is the book for you. The Enchantment of Ravens is basically about Isabel, who is an artist who draws fair folk, which are the fairies in this land. And she gets commissioned by the royal prince to draw him. She unknowingly draws sorrow in his eyes, which is a weakness of the prince's, which is punishable. So she has to stand trial for what she has done. Along the way, her and the prince get to know each other. Things happen, you know. And yeah, this is just such a light and fluffy read. I love this. I think it's not like the literary merit is just not there. Like, it's not like, oh my gosh, here are these metaphors. Like, oh my gosh, here are these symbols and stuff. But regardless of that, it's such a good book and I love it. And if you're just looking for a light, fluffy read, this is the one. This is a little bit of a weird recommendation. I just thought I would give you a book if you're feeling like you can't leave your home because you shouldn't be leaving your house, then I thought I would recommend The Martian by Andy Weir, because he is stuck on Mars and he's not allowed to leave Mars. So if you want to experience that feeling but on a different planet, I would recommend this book. This is basically about the astronaut Mark Watney who gets stranded on Mars. He must learn to live a life there and build his own food, and it's basically a science fiction novel. It's not really, is it science fiction? Yeah. A science fiction novel where we learn how he survives on Mars and how it's even possible. And there's some science aspects to it. Like, you definitely have to read through a bunch of like scientific explanations, but also it's not too heavy with it. It's mostly about the journey that he goes through since he has to live alone on this entire planet with no one around. It's really good. If you've seen the movie, or if you haven't seen the movie, I would recommend seeing the movie. Yeah. Continuing on the theme of people alone being trapped somewhere, The Woman in the Window. This is about a woman in the window. No, this is about a woman with agoraphobia, and that basically means that she is afraid of stepping outside of her home. Along the way, we find out a lot about her life and how she came to be this way. Also, there are some different characters thrown in there that affect the way she has to stay inside of her home. I would read this because it's a lot of in her head stuff, and if you really enjoy character stories where you kind of get in their head and you dive into everything they're feeling at every moment, this is the book for you. I love that. I love getting into characters' heads, and I think AJ Finn does a really good job of doing that in this book. I read this a long time ago, so I can't say for sure if it has like amazing prose or it has amazing pacing. I have no idea. It might be the boringest book ever, but at the time when I was reading it, I loved it and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, so I would recommend it. And I'm definitely going to be reading it again, maybe not now, but hopefully in the future. So I'll let you know if it holds up. The next book I want to talk about is Les by Andrew Sean Greer. This is a story about Les. He is a 49-year-old man. He's about to turn 50, and he's a washed-up author, and one day he receives an opportunity to go to a different country, so he decides to take this opportunity to go to another country. And throughout his time exploring, we learn more about his past relationships, about the way he has lived his life leading up to this moment, his regrets, his romances, just basically everything in between of that. It's marketed as a romance story, which I agree at some points it is a romance story, but I think this story is more about Les and his journey of acceptance of himself and the life he wants to live rather than about the romance. So I would disagree with the way this summary is written. I kind of just like it for how we dive into Les's mind, which is another thing I'm discovering I like a lot about. I like more of. I really like books that dive into people's mind, and I think that's why this one was really well done. It's funny. I laughed out loud sometimes. It's a light read, so if you're looking to escape from this stressful time, read this book. The next book I want to recommend is actually a poetry collection. I know that a lot of modern poets get a lot of hate because they think that they're not deep enough or like they want the real poetry, but I disagree. I think any type of poem can have its own feeling. It really depends on the person and who you are and how you interpret it. So the next book I want to recommend is Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. I feel like Rupi Kaur gets a lot of hate for literally just like being a #1 New York Times bestseller and like having a cool book. Like it's not all about the like hipster aesthetic or whatever. Like I get it. Book is used a lot for people who want to have a certain aesthetic, but like at the same time I think it holds so many good words and so many good poems that I related to, and the fact that it is modern actually helps me relate to it. So I think saying that it's not real poetry just doesn't make sense to me, because not every single poem has to be about a tree or nature. It can be about yourself in simple words, and it can still be called poetry, is what I'm trying to say. The next time he points out the hair on your legs is growing back, remind that boy your body is not his home. He is a guest. Warn him to never outstep his welcome again. Save the Day by Morgan Matson is a book that is just so good. I don't know how to explain it besides it's really good. It's basically about this high school senior who doesn't want to think about college. She doesn't want to think about deciding where she wants to go, and she's about to attend her sister's wedding that happens to be at her house. So in between all of this, she has to deal with a wedding that's basically going to shambles because of the wedding planner who quits and because there's just a lot of mess happening. And then there's also a familial aspect in this where she's really excited to see all her family come together. There's some fights that break out. There's some chaos that ensues. It's just an all-around good time. It's deep in a way, but it also is very light and fun. And there's a lot that happens in very few pages. Not very few, about 386 pages. But there's a lot that happens, and I really enjoyed it. And I think everyone needs to read this book. If you're looking for a contemporary and you don't like contemporaries, read this book. Not that I don't like contemporaries. I like contemporaries. It's just some of them just don't do it for me, and like this one did. Next book on my list is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Everybody knows this book. You've probably seen the movie. I just think you should read it because if you want to just dive into a book and then stay there and then like never leave the book, I think I would read this, because when you're reading it, you never want to leave. You just want to keep reading and figure out what's happening and figure out the twist at the end. It's kind of predictable, but it's only because people have seen this book and seen this book referenced so many times that it is a little bit predictable. But I think getting there to the points of the plot twists and everything like that is a really fun journey to go on. If you don't know Gone Girl, I don't have to explain this book, do I? I think everybody knows what Gone Girl is. This is basically about Nick Dunn. His wife either gets kidnapped or killed. He doesn't know, and he has to figure out what happened to her. But along with that, he is being accused of being the killer and being the kidnapper of his wife. And along the way of that, we learn their journey of becoming a couple and becoming married. And then we also learn about a diary that his wife kept, that where she wrote everything that she was feeling about him and their relationship. And that basically gives more insight into why he might have done it. Did he do it? I don't know. Last book I want to recommend, The Night Tiger by Yangtze Chu. This book is just so good. It's a little bit of magical realism. It's a little bit of real life. It's a little bit of historical fiction. I love this book. I think I really love stories with a little bit of magical realism in there. It's actually really fun to read. This is basically about a woman who finds a little souvenir, and she has to go find, well, she doesn't have to go, but she wants to go find where the souvenir came from. And between that, she finds a lot of secrets. She discovers a lot of things that happen in her life and how she's connected to this little thumb. The souvenir is a little thumb, like a finger that's like broken off. Anyways, in between all that, there's a bunch of mysterious deaths happening, and they believe that the deaths are happening because of a tiger that comes up and kills people. The story is described as a coming-of-age novel, but then also there's a little bit of magical realism, a little bit of romance, a little bit of historical fiction thrown in there, and we just learn a lot about all the characters, and it's a fun time. I read this really slowly. I think it's a good read to read slowly. You really get devoured into the world, and every single time I came back to this book, I would find myself just wanting more and like loving every second of it. So just read it. It's just a good time. You feel very atmospheric while reading it, and yeah. Also, like, look at this cover. Like, that is beautiful. Wow. That is the end of all my book recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. I will be doing more of these. Hopefully, I'll be reading more books so then I can recommend more. I'm running out of, like, things to do. Like, I kind of want to do some tags, but then I feel like my entire channel is going to turn into me just doing book tags, so I'm trying not to do that. But in not doing that, I'm just not filming any videos. So I'm going to try to be doing some more book tags soon. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right.